Hello and welcome to another demonstration walkthrough for Postgres. So the one we're working on right now is talking about loading JSON from an API. We're going to do a bit of spidering. We're going to create a little table and we're going to have a series of URLs, and this is going to be done spider style. The data we're going to pull is a thing called the Star Wars API, and it's a REST-based API that returns JSON. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to spider in a way like a Google web search does, in that we are going to actually read the documents, and then in documents there are more URLs that we're going to parse out. Films, species, vehicles. But then if you go to like species, let's go to films. If you go to film 6, so we're going to parse this, then we're going to spider it, and we'll go to film 6. And then you look at film 6, and there's a bunch of people in it. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep reading these until we have, in effect, read all the data. We're going to use the stuff inside the data to guide our future searching. Okay? So we'll talk about all of that stuff. This is free and open. It's really cool. It has a rate limit. I hope we don't hit the rate limit. So let's take a look. You need to get the code for pgfree.com/code/swapi SWAPI, Star Wars API. We're going to load that down. And I hope by now you have myutils.py from a previous example, and HiddenPy is already set up. Okay? And let's go ahead and drop the swapi table in our PSQL. It didn't exist, so it didn't matter. And swapi is going to create this. So let's go ahead and start another browser here. And I'm going to start running Python 3 swapi.py. And so now what's happened is it's actually got it started by, so if we go look in here, let's take a look at, let's find a select URL, their status not equal 200. That'll get us what we want. You can always run this select because select URL from swapi. So these are URLs to do. So let's do URL comma status. Yeah, I probably should say where status is not equal to 200. I should say status is null. It might be a better. Yeah, that gives us where status is null. Let me put that back into my SQL code. And the ones that are 200 are the ones that I've retrieved. Let's make that be equal 200, and it is null. So 200 is the HTTP code. So if you look here, we've got serial ID, we got the URL to retrieve, that's unique. We have the status, which is the HTTP status, 200 is good. We're going to leave status empty. Then we got a JSONB body, and then we got a couple of timestamps. And so what the program does to get itself started is it inserts some known URLs, films 1, species 1, and people 1, and then let's take a look at it. swapi.py. So by now I hope you know what secrets work and how cursors work. Some print statements. I use the MySQL, myutils do query just to kind of make it a little less whatever. So what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if there are URLs in the table, and if we got no URLs, then we are going to insert films sub1, species sub1. It's just a little insert using, right? That's the string substitution using f strings, where it basically takes this, it reads the variable obj and replaces that. Looks a little bit like a Django template, which is kind of cool. And so that's what inserted all of these records that we already see. That code, it said there, because it created it and it didn't find it, so it just inserted these things. And there's this cool little status function that I've got that I call a couple times that checks to see how many we've got, how many where the status is null, how many where the status is 200, which is successful, and then how many that have had an error. Now, if all goes well, we shouldn't have an error. But if you hit a rate limit or the network messes up, you will start seeing errors in here. You'll see the status having like 404s or 500s or something, right? 200 is good, right? And so it's going to ask us how many. We got a total of 3. We got 3 left to do. That's because these have not been retrieved yet. How many good ones did we get and how many error ones did we get? That's just all select statements reading from it. So now what we're going to do is we are going to ask how many documents, right? We got some accumulation variables. How many documents do you want? So we're going to look for a URL from it where the status is null and only grab one. Query value is like read a row, run the select statement, read the row, pull the 0th element out of the row, or none. And if URL is none, we're done. There are no unretrieved documents. Now we're going to start reading it. Actually, let me go ahead and start this thing. And let me do 5 documents. Is that going to work? Yeah. Now see, it takes a while actually, because one of the things going on right here is it's finding and adding more links to the database. So just we retrieve 5 documents, but if I do a select count star from swapi, we got 45 rows, and most of them are unretrieved. So it retrieved 3 documents. 1 document got 2 new ones. 3 documents got 34 new ones. They're adding these up, right? And so this is a queue. You can think of this. Now this is a restartable process. It's a spider. And so if I get out of this, it said, well, we loaded 5 documents. We have 40 to do. 5 are good, and we're starting over. So now I can start over, and it says, oh, I know based on reading the database what I've got to do. So let's do 25 documents. Now this is a slower process, and so this is why it's important for this to be restartable. So far the API is going well and it's not causing problems, so we'll just kind of let that crank along while I talk a little bit more about the code. All right, so we can select count. So we got 50 in there, 51. All right, so there's a lot. We're gaining URLs as we're doing this. Oh, and then it committed, so we're going to have probably a bunch more. Yeah. So we got 25 documents loaded. Let's just load 100 more and go talk. Go load. Go little Python program. Go, go. Okay, so let's take a look. Some of this you've seen in the Gmain example. We're using the request library this time. We're going to grab the text and the status code, and then we're going to do an update. The key is to set the status also so that we don't double retrieve. Now hopefully this is a 200, but if it's an error, we're going to actually have that in there. Put the body in and set the updated at equals now, where URL equals %s. What we're seeing here is 1, 2, 3 %s's, which means we need a 3 tuple when we run the query. So we're going to run the query with the SQL and send in our variables, status, text, and the URL. And that does the insert, and I just update my aggregation variables. And like before, I make it so I can hit Control-C at various places. Any other kind of exception, I just dump a whole bunch of debug stuff out, and away we go. And so then each time through, oh, that's what we're seeing, the count where the status is null. This is a pretty chatty API, pretty chatty thing. And so I'm going to select count where it's null, and then I'm going to print what status was, what URL I got, and how many I have left to do. So this is the to-do list. It sort of grows. You'll see that the to-do list kind of grows, and then it sort of shrinks. Shrink, 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 shrink. It's shrinking, and it might grow again. We're starting to run out of things to do, so let's go do another 100 documents and see what we're done. Look, there's only so many documents, so it doesn't run forever, which is good because we don't want to rate limit the poor API. Okay, so the next thing we do, here's a to-do list, is I'm going to take the return body and I'm going to do a JSON operation in Python. I'm going to load JSON from a string, which parses it. This is going to blow up. I probably should have put a try except around here. When I write these things, I tend not to put the try except in until it starts blowing up, because then I'm ready to debug it. Like this API would be blowing up, but it's giving me back good JSON. So I haven't written the code to deal with if the API gives me bad JSON, because it's kind of hard to test. So yeah, whatever. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look through all the linked data. Now this is what I was showing you before. When you look at one of these things, I'm going to look through films, species, vehicles. This is a nested loop. So I'm going to look through all of the vehicles, all of the starships. You'll notice that this is all in the form of URLs. So I'm looking at films, species, vehicles, starships, and characters. Maybe they're not there. So I'm going to pull out of the parsed JavaScript, because the parsed JavaScript in this case is really just a Python dictionary. This becomes a Python dictionary. Name Luke Skywalker. Films is a Python dictionary. Films keys in that dictionary that points to a list. So I'm going to grab this list at the end of films, and that's what I'm getting here, and that's what I'm calling stuff. Now I'm checking to make sure that stuff is a list object, because if it's not a list object, I'm just going to skip it. I don't know what. I only am capable of handling, this is like a Guardian pattern where I'm only really capable of handling lists. So I don't want this next line to blow up. So I'm just like, this next line would blow up unless it's a list. So just Guardian it so that at least I don't blow up. Somebody might put an error message in here or something, but I'm just like, I think the data's pretty clean. If the data started getting yucky, I'd start putting error messages in there. Then what we're going to do is I'm just going to loop through that list. It's pretty simple, right? Got a list, go through all these things, and I'm going to insert into it with just the nothing but the URL, but on conflict, URL do nothing. So what I'm saying here is if it's already there and there's a unique clause, right? There's a unique clause somewhere up here. There's a unique clause. URL is varchar 2048 unique. So that basically is going to trigger this on conflict of the URL field, don't insert. So that just saves me. Now, you can also do on conflict update, but we don't care about that. All we're doing is adding to our to-do list in this case, and if it's already been done, I don't care, so do nothing. Again, we have 1%s in this SQL, and so we have a one tuple of parenthesis item, comma, parenthesis. And then I'm going to commit. And that's probably why this runs so slowly, is because I got that commit inside this for loop. So every insert that I'm doing here is committing. So I probably would be well served. I would be well served to bring this commit. So when you download this, what am I doing? Get rid of some spaces at the end yet. So when you do this, it'll run faster because this query is going to insert, but basically I'm only going to commit once per retrieval. Okay, I was committing everything I was inserting, so that meant that every time this number went up, it was running a commit, so I didn't have to commit quite so often. Oh, it's finished. So it loaded 207 documents, loaded 202 in that particular run. Total was 207. They're all good. There was no errors. So we're done. So we've got everything here. And you should see it the same as well. And because I just fixed this little thing, it's a choice whether you commit every time, if it's going to blow up. So maybe you do want to commit every time. But I think committing right here after you've gone through the, if the JSON's working and you're going through it, these inserts aren't going to blow up. So you might as well kind of queue them up and sort of blast them as in a batch to the server. And then basically every 25th record, I'm going to run a commit. Actually, I could just take this commit out because I'm kind of already doing that. Every 25th record, I'm going to run a commit. I'm going to wait for a second and then sleep mostly so I could hit the Control-C if it's blowing up. And at the end, I do a summary and I close the database connection. Summary, again, is the thing that puts out this little cute line right there. Just helps me know what the heck's going on, and so the darn thing is done. And so I have now crawled it, right? So this is a crawling thing where it starts with a couple URLs, but retrieves the stuff, looks at what's in those URLs, and then adds to the to-do list unless I've already seen it. So I'm only going to hit everyone once. I'm careful about that, right? I only hit it once. So for example, now if I look at some of these things, URL comma status, well, there's none of those. Let's just do limit 1, limit 5. So URL comma status, so you can kind of see that over time, the successful, you got a status 200, which for us inside this database means that I got a successful retrieval of this particular URL, and the I can now say URL status, then I'll say JSONB, and it'll just be ugly at that point because JSONB is really big. Actually, it's body. It's gigantic. So URL status, there's a URL, there's the status, and here is like a whole bunch of JSONB. Now you'll also note that the JSON, and it's like, yeah, the JSONB is not the exact same format as the JSON that came back, which has a bunch of pretty spaces in it, and that's because the JSONB in the database is parsed and compressed, right? So this is a reconstitution of the internal data structure that Postgres has stored. Okay, so we now have all this stuff done. And so let's come back in a second part and play with it now that it's all loaded.